I'm not sure when I got this truck. I guess it would have been about 3 years ago, maybe a little longer. This would have been maybe my third or fourth RC four-wheel drive purchase. Bought a couple 118s, then a D90 Grande 2, and then found this thing on Facebook Marketplace for about $450. And when I got it, made a few changes to it. I dropped the suspension down because I wanted it to ride in a full droop mode. So I just ran the factory shocks on it. I cut the coils, ran just bump coils internally. And I removed everything but the main leafs on the springs. And it's been like that for a couple years, and I've just beat the absolute snot out of this thing. And it very surprisingly has never broken at all. In fact, kind of, I don't know. So anyway, a few years into it now, and I kind of realized after watching this thing that I kind of wouldn't mind having it sit back up a little higher. And it kind of all started with me having purchased a set of LCX shocks off of Amazon a little more than a year ago for my Bully 2, which I never used because I ordered some Draft Tech 90s for that thing and set it up with those instead. And part of the reason I never ran these was because they were out of adjustment. A lot of these shocks that come with collars on them that, hold the little O-rings in the bottom, a lot of times those collars are on really tight. So it kind of pinches that O-ring in and limits their travel, causes them to seize or whatever. So if you're filling them with the oil and getting them tuned properly, I switched over to also using the silver ball ends from the Bilsteins that come on the factory shocks, which kind of dropped them down from being 100 millimeter shocks to about 92, 93 millimeter overall. So effectively kind of gave this about, I'd say, a 4 to 5 inch equivalent ride lift all around. I didn't want to run any shorter shocks up front. I also have the Grande 2 hoops up there, so that gives me another option for mounting, so I can kind of mount these a little bit differently than just the standard single holes that come with the TF2. Stayed with the single leafs on the springs as well, and changed out my front foams. Those were just completely disintegrated inside. As you can see, the driver has now been installed, and he's doing a pretty good job of driving this thing around, I must say. That said, this kind of comes to the part of the video if you're kind of not really a fan of watching people kind of abuse TF2s. I don't really abuse it, but I definitely push this thing kind of a little bit harder than what I normally would. And that was because I was discovering A, how much it can do now, and B, I just wanted to see what it can take. Thankfully, nothing broke once again throughout the entire video. It surprises me to this day that this thing runs just the main leafs, and I've never experienced any kind of axle wrap situation. I've never had any gear strip. I've never really had anything go wrong with this truck at all, except replacing the motor within a couple months after getting it. The original owner told me that it was an old replacement that he had put in, and it was an original, I think, Crawlmaster or Torquemaster from Holmes Hobbies, a 540, and it gave up fairly quickly, so I basically replaced it with almost the exact same thing and have been running it very happily ever since. It's an amazing truck. So, like I said, this part coming up is kind of where things start to get a little unruly, I guess. But I wasn't really pushing things past what I felt comfortable with doing. With having this truck now as long as I've had it, I kind of fully understand like what it's going to do. And then also too, having run my Bully 2 as much as I have, it makes me kind of look at lines a little bit differently. And so I just decided to basically just take this thing up some stuff that I wouldn't normally, and decided to see what it can do. So anyway, it's moves like that right there. Thankfully, I have a 45 kilogram brushless servo in this thing, and it steers fast enough to be able to save it, shit like that. But if it was able to walk up this, I just wanted to keep going. So I'm going to shut up and let this thing kind of run for a second. And it reaches a point coming up here pretty quick where I decide to basically just kind of skip through a bunch of it, fast forward, save you the time. If you're here for this long, thanks, much appreciated. Thank you very much to the 1,904 subscribers as of this morning I've seen. That's seriously like 1,900 more than I ever thought that I was going to have. I know they say that a lot, but I didn't really think this channel was ever going to get off the ground. I realize it's a slow mover compared to a lot of other channels, but you know what? My trucks are slow movers compared to a lot of other channels too. I like slow motion. Some people do, some people don't. I just like watching these and seeing what they can do. Anyway, I get stuck here, definitely. I turned a little too late. I should have been a little higher left on this. I should have turned a lot earlier. And so the one opportunity that I had right here, I kind of gave it a little too much throttle, and you'll see it throws me to the right a little too fast. And so at this point, right front's bound, and I'm pretty much suspended between, you know, the rock slider and the front bumper. So I'm just kind of teetering. I've also kicked whatever traction I had out on the left. So I decided to back out and come at this a different way. Now, I have done this line with my Little Guy Racing Parts 24, my Comp 24 rig that I have with the DJ Crawler pins on it. And that was probably one of, at least in my small little micro world, was probably one of the cooler lines that I think I've personally ever done. So I kind of thought that I would give it a shot with this, despite the fact that it's like 2.5 times the size. And of course, this gets a little unruly. It gains traction here, so I see that there's a line. I knew that there was a line, I just couldn't find it. And it just so happens I end up right on the perfect line, and then all of a sudden I lose it right here somewhere. Right there. And so now that I'm kind of like drawn in, but thankfully I got the wheel up, I really don't know what's going on at this point, so I'm just going to kind of keep trying to bring it around. Tipping becomes an issue here in a second, but it just really just more or less just wants to settle. And I can't remember what this truck clocked in at for weight. I think it's like, I want to say it's like 9.4 pounds or something like that. It might be a little bit heavier than that. It's not quite as heavy as my Galante 2, which clocks in at like 12 pounds. That thing's a fat beast. But this just has this lower side weight to it that seems to kind of hold it in a lot of places, and it just doesn't move. And with the suspension having as much rebound and kind of interactive, I don't know, properties about it that, you know, responds to everything that's going on, it seems to just drive so much better. It's saving the leaf springs from having to work nearly as hard as what they were before. The leaves really are just in place now to just kind of hold the axle from moving front and back. Which also brings me to the other thing. If you run the Z-Boxes and the Teraflex shackles on your rear axle, just be prepared to kind of gain about 3/8 of an inch of wheelbase. Just the nature of those push the axle towards the rear a little bit, which is also another reason why I wanted to lift this. As you can see right there, it's definitely off center from the center of the wheel well. Speaking of wheel wells, that's the next project. Now that I've gotten this far with this truck, the next step is to actually fabricate out of metal. I'm going to use 0.025 sheet metal, but I'm definitely going to go ahead and make some inner fenders for this all the way around to finally hide all the wiring and stuff like that. So cheer me on for that one. It's going to be a fairly easy project. I love working with tin. It's a really, really easy medium to work with, and I think it's going to be a really robust, also medium to have in there. I don't like the really thin injection molded stamped plastic ones that you can get from RC4 Overdrive for like 10 bucks. I still want to cut a spot where I can get to that power switch under there and just be able to reach right up under the right front and turn the machine on and off. What else did I do? I fixed the lowest two lights. You can barely see there. What else have I got going on this thing? I'm missing a left front signal cover, and I don't know how to go about getting that. I also have to find my driver's side door latch, excuse me. What else? The front foams, this is kind of where they shine. I replaced those in this thing. I think I went back to the stock ones that came with it, and I'm happy that I did. So this is just stock foams, ambient air pressure, lockdown, no venting. Kind of like, you know, a real tire would be. You don't really poke holes in your tire before you go out and go rock crawling in the desert. You run air pressure in them, you air down, and you deal with how those tires run. Inserts be damned. I don't agree with a whole lot of this concept of warring factions anymore of who's running what. I don't care. I run what works for me. It seems to work great. Unfortunately, the battery dies and the camera pretty soon. So thanks much for watching if you stuck around for this endurance video. And I will see you on the next one where hopefully I can take this thing out and get some actual real rock time in. Maybe some trail time. See you later. Bye.